Maya Chen had been exploring the abandoned research facility for 3 hours when she heard the sound that changed everything. Her specialized wheelchair moved silently through the debris-littered corridors, its advanced sensors mapping the layout while she searched for salvageable technology. The facility had been evacuated during the HFY War 50 years ago, and most scavengers avoided it due to rumors of dangerous alien experiments left behind. The sound came again, a low, mournful wail that seemed to vibrate through the metal walls themselves. Maya paused, her enhanced hearing implants isolating the frequency. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic, and it was in pain. She had been paralyzed from the waist down since birth, a genetic condition that Earth's medical technology still couldn't fully cure. But Maya had never let that define her limitations. She had modified her wheelchair with military-grade mobility systems, sensor arrays that rivaled spacecraft equipment, and translation software that could decode most known alien languages. Her colleagues at the Terran Exploration Guild called her Ghost because of how quietly she could move through dangerous territories. Following the sound deeper into the facility, Maya's sensors began picking up unusual energy readings. The walls here were different, not the standard titanium steel composite used in human construction, but something that shimmered with an opalescent quality. Alien technology, definitely. The Catherians had been known for their biomechanical innovations before the war drove them from this sector. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Maya's breath away. The ceiling soared at least 50 meters overhead, supported by organic-looking pillars that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. But it wasn't the architecture that made her gasp. It was what occupied the center of the room: a dragon. Maya's rational mind immediately began cataloging details. The creature was enormous, perhaps 20 meters from snout to tail tip. Its scales shifted between deep emerald and midnight blue, and despite its obvious distress, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. But beauty quickly gave way to horror as she noticed the restraints. Chains of some unknown metal wrapped around the dragon's legs, neck, and wings. The shackles pulsed with the same energy signature her sensors had detected, and wherever they touched the creature's scales, the flesh was raw and bleeding. The dragon's great head was turned away from her, but she could see the rise and fall of its massive rib cage, hear the labored breathing that spoke of exhaustion and pain. Maya's wheelchair moved forward almost without her conscious command. Every instinct told her to retreat, to call for backup, to report this discovery to the guild. Dragons were supposed to be extinct. The last confirmed sighting had been over 2 centuries ago, during humanity's first expansion into this galaxy. They were legends, myths, stories told to children about the ancient guardians who had once protected entire star systems. But here was proof that the legends were real. As she drew closer, the dragon's breathing pattern changed. Its great head lifted slightly, and Maya caught a glimpse of an enormous golden eye watching her approach. She expected fear, or perhaps predatory interest. What she saw instead was intelligence, vast, ancient, and utterly exhausted. The dragon made no aggressive moves as Maya circled to get a better view of the restraint system. Up close, she could see that the chains weren't just physical bonds. They hummed with energy that seemed to drain something vital from the creature. Neural suppressors, she realized. The Catherians had developed technology to control telepathic species during the war. But this was far more sophisticated than anything she had seen in the archives. Maya's translation implants crackled to life as the dragon made a sound, not the wail of pain she had heard before, but something more complex. Linguistic patterns her software couldn't immediately parse, but the emotional content was clear: pleading, hope. And underneath it all, a bone-deep weariness that spoke of decades, perhaps centuries, of captivity. She should leave. Maya knew that. She should document the location, report back to the guild, and let the xenobiologists and diplomats handle first contact with what might be the last dragon in the galaxy. But as she looked into those ancient golden eyes, she saw something that overrode all her training and common sense. She saw herself. Maya had spent her entire life being underestimated because of her disability. People saw the wheelchair first, then made assumptions about what she could and couldn't do. They meant well, mostly, but they couldn't understand that being paralyzed didn't make her broken. It just meant she had to find different ways to accomplish her goals. Looking at this magnificent creature, reduced to a chained prisoner, Maya felt a rage building in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. Whatever the Catherians had done here, whoever was responsible for this cruelty, they had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that physical restraints were enough to break a spirit. They were wrong. Maya began examining the restraint system more carefully, her scanner array working overtime to analyze the energy patterns and structural weak points. The chains were incredibly sophisticated, but they were also old. 50 years without maintenance in an abandoned facility had taken their toll. Microfractures in the metal, power fluctuations in the energy matrix, backup systems running on emergency power that was slowly failing. The dragon watched her work with growing interest. It seemed to understand what she was attempting, and Maya thought she caught the faintest trace of communication through her implants. Not words, exactly, but impressions, gratitude, warning, and something that might have been the draconic equivalent of her own stubborn determination. Maya's analysis revealed what she had hoped to find. The restraint system had multiple redundancies, but they all fed through a central control node located about 3 meters above the dragon's head. The positioning made sense. Too high for the dragon to reach even with its long neck, protected by overlapping energy shields. But the Catherians hadn't accounted for a human in a hover-capable wheelchair. She began her ascent slowly, her chair's anti-gravity generators humming as they lifted her toward the control node. The dragon's eyes followed her progress, and she could feel its tension building. Whether in anticipation or concern for her safety, she couldn't tell. The control node was more complex than anything in Maya's experience, but the basic principles were familiar. Energy distribution, neural suppression fields, structural integrity monitors. The Catherians used biological interfaces for their technology, which meant the control system was essentially alive. Maya's cybernetic implants, designed to interface with human neural networks, shouldn't have been compatible. Shouldn't have been. But Maya had never been content with shouldn't. She had spent years modifying her implants, improving their flexibility and range. Now she extended a direct connection to the control node's bio-interface, her consciousness touching something alien and vast. The system resisted at first. Evolutionary security protocols trying to reject her foreign neural patterns. But Maya had dealt with rejection her entire life. She pushed deeper, her human determination meeting Catherian biotechnology in a clash of incompatible systems that somehow, impossibly, began to merge. Information flooded her mind. The dragon's name was Thyrallax the Starkeeper, and he was indeed ancient beyond human comprehension. The facility hadn't been a research station, it had been a prison, designed specifically to hold him. The Catherians had captured him during their expansion into this sector, believing his knowledge of stellar navigation and deep space phenomena would give them military advantages. But dragons, Maya learned, were not creatures to be controlled. Thyrallax had resisted every attempt at forced cooperation, enduring decades of neural suppression rather than betray the locations of other dragon enclaves. The Catherians had finally abandoned the facility when the war turned against them, leaving their prisoner to die slowly in chains. Maya felt Thyrallax's consciousness brush against hers as she worked to unravel the restraint protocols. His mental voice was like standing in a cosmic wind, vast, ancient, and filled with the memory of stars being born. "Young human," came his thoughts. Why do you risk yourself for one who is already lost? Maya's response surprised them both with its clarity and conviction. Because nobody should die in chains. Because being trapped doesn't mean being defeated. Because sometimes the impossible just needs someone stubborn enough to try. She felt something that might have been draconic laughter ripple through their connection. Stubborn, yes. I can sense this quality in you strongly. Very well, Star Watcher Maya. If you would free this old keeper of secrets, then let us see what human determination can accomplish when paired with draconic knowledge. The control node's final security layer required something Maya hadn't expected, a willing consciousness to take responsibility for the prisoner's actions. The Catherians had built in a safeguard that would hold the one who freed Thyrilax accountable for any destruction he might cause. It was meant to prevent casual liberation attempts. Maya didn't hesitate. She accepted the neural bond, feeling Thyrilax's surprise and something deeper, respect, as she took on the burden of his freedom. The restraints released with a sound like breaking thunder. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya floated 3 meters above the chamber floor, her wheelchair's anti-gravity systems holding her steady as she watched 50 years of imprisonment end in a cascade of falling chains. The metal restraints hit the chamber floor with echoing clangs that seemed to go on forever, each impact marking the end of one kind of captivity and the beginning of something unprecedented in the galaxy. Thyrilax. The Starkeeper moved for the first time in decades. The dragon's movements were careful, almost tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe the neural suppressors were truly gone. His great wings unfurled slowly, revealing span that reached nearly from wall to wall of the enormous chamber. The membrane between the wing bones shimmered with patterns that reminded Maya of star charts, and she realized with wonder that they probably were. Dragons navigated by stellar cartography, imprinted in their very being. Maya's implants buzzed with information flowing through their newly established neural link. Thyrilax wasn't just communicating with her. He was sharing memories, experiences, knowledge accumulated over centuries of traveling between stars. She saw nebulae being born through his eyes, watched civilizations rise and fall across galactic timescales, felt the deep contentment of a species that had made the cosmos itself their home. But underneath the wonder was concern. Thyrilax's body had been weakened by decades of forced immobility and neural suppression. Maya's medical scanners, now enhanced by their bond, detected muscle atrophy, metabolic imbalances, and neural pathways damaged by the restraint system's crude methods of control. The dragon was free, but he was far from whole. "I can feel your worry, young Star Watcher," Thyrilax's mental voice carried amusement tinged with affection. "You freed me from captivity, yet now you concern yourself with my physical condition. Truly, humans are fascinating creatures." Maya guided her wheelchair down to floor level, maintaining a respectful distance as Thyrilax stretched muscles that hadn't moved in 50 years. "The facility's medical bay might have regeneration equipment," she said aloud, testing whether he could understand human speech as well as her directed thoughts. Thyrilax's great head turned toward her, and Maya was struck again by the intelligence in those golden eyes. "I understand your words, Maya Chen, though your species' verbal communication seems inefficient compared to direct thought transfer." His voice was deep, resonant, with harmonics that seemed to come from multiple vocal cords working in harmony. "But yes, restoration of my physical form would be beneficial before we depart this place." "We?" Maya hadn't considered what would happen after freeing the dragon. In her focus on solving the immediate problem of his captivity, she hadn't thought beyond the moment of liberation. Thyrilax lowered his massive head until they were at eye level, his expression somehow managing to convey gentle humor despite being utterly alien. "Did you think I would simply abandon the one who freed me?" The neural bond you accepted carries deeper implications than you realize, brave human. You are now linked to me as my anchor to this reality. Where I go, you must follow, or risk both our existences being torn apart by the void between stars. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up approaching sounds from the facility's upper levels. Heavy footsteps, mechanical whirring, voices speaking in clipped military tones. Her exploration had not gone unnoticed after all. "We have company," she warned, pulling up tactical displays on her wheelchair's interface. Thyrilax's head lifted, his nostrils flaring as he tested the air. "Humans, yes, but also—" His expression darkened. "Catherian biosignatures. It appears some remained behind to monitor their prize. They return now, drawn by the deactivation of my restraints." Through the facility's security network, Maya accessed external cameras and felt her blood chill. 3 Catherian war forms were moving through the upper corridors with purposeful intent, their biomechanical forms shifting between bipedal and quadrupedal configurations as they navigated obstacles. Behind them came a squad of human mercenaries in combat armor, weapons trained on every shadow. The Catherians must have been waiting, Maya realized. They knew someone would eventually find this place. They're using humans as expendable scouts while they remain safe in the rear. Thyrilax's eyes blazed with an anger that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Then they shall learn the folly of imprisoning a Starkeeper. But first, young Maya, we must ensure you survive the coming conflict. The bond between us means your death would trap my consciousness forever between dimensions." Maya checked her wheelchair's defensive systems. Energy shields, emergency acceleration, a small plasma cutter meant for salvage work. Against military-grade weapons and Catherian biotechnology, they would be laughably inadequate. But Maya had never let inadequate equipment stop her before. "The medical bay is 2 levels up," she said, calling up facility schematics on her display. "There's also an industrial fabrication unit 1 level down. If we can reach either one—" "There is another option," Thyrilax interrupted, his mental voice carrying undertones Maya was learning to recognize as draconic determination. "The neural bond that ties us together can be used for more than communication. If you are willing to trust me completely, I can share more than memories and knowledge. I can share capabilities." Maya understood immediately what he was offering, and the implications made her heart race. Neural fusion? That's theoretical technology. No one's ever successfully linked alien and human consciousness at that level. "No one has ever tried with a dragon," Thyrilax replied, his golden eyes fixed on hers. "We are creatures of void and vacuum, beings who exist partially outside normal space-time. A fusion with human consciousness, with your species' remarkable adaptability and determination, might create something neither of our kinds has seen before." The sounds of the approaching forces grew louder. Maya could hear her wheelchair's passive sensors detecting energy weapons powering up, the distinctive whine of Catherian biocannons charging. They had perhaps minutes before the chamber was breached. Maya had spent her life proving that limitations were meant to be overcome. Being paralyzed had taught her that the most important strength wasn't physical. It was the refusal to accept defeat. Now, facing impossible odds in an alien facility with a dragon offering her access to powers beyond human comprehension, she made the only choice that felt true to who she was. "Do it!" The fusion began as a gentle touch, Thyrilax's vast consciousness carefully intertwining with Maya's human thoughts. She felt her awareness expanding, her perception shifting to encompass wavelengths of light and energy her species had never evolved to detect. Through the dragon's senses, she could feel the approaching enemies as heat signatures and electrical fields, their biorhythms painting detailed pictures of their positions and intentions. But the flow wasn't one way. Maya felt Thyrilax experience human emotions for the first time. The sharp bite of determination, the warm glow of compassion, the fierce joy of solving an impossible problem. Her memories of overcoming physical limitations resonated through his consciousness, teaching him that strength could exist in forms his species had never considered. The fusion deepened, and Maya felt her body changing. Not physically. Her legs remained paralyzed, her human form unchanged. But her wheelchair responded to her thoughts now as if it were part of her body. The facility's systems opened to her consciousness like flowers turning toward sunlight. Most remarkably, she could feel Thyrilax's power flowing through their bond. Draconic abilities adapted to work through human technology and determination. The chamber's entrance exploded inward as the first wave of mercenaries breached the door. They moved in perfect formation, weapons trained on Thyrilax as they established a perimeter. Behind them, the Catherian warforms flowed into the room like liquid metal, their biocannons already tracking the dragon's vital points. Maya and Thyrilax moved as one. The wheelchair shot forward with acceleration that should have been impossible, Maya's enhanced reflexes guiding her between weapon emplacements while energy bolts seared the air around her. But she wasn't just dodging, she was calculating, her human mind now enhanced with draconic spatial reasoning that turned the chaotic combat into a three-dimensional puzzle to be solved. Thyrilax's roar shook the chamber, but it wasn't just sound. Dragons, Maya learned through their bond, used sonic frequencies to manipulate local space-time. The mercenaries' weapons stuttered as temporal fields disrupted their targeting systems. Electronics failed as reality itself became uncertain around the dragon's voice. But the Catherians had come prepared. Their biocannons fired not energy bolts, but temporal nets designed to trap consciousness outside linear time. Maya felt the attacks coming through her enhanced perception and did something no one expected. She flew directly into them. Her wheelchair's anti-gravity systems, now boosted by Thyrilax's understanding of stellar mechanics, carried her through impossible aerial maneuvers. But more than that, her human adaptability allowed her to navigate temporal distortions that would have confused even draconic senses. She became a moving paradox, a paralyzed human soaring through twisted time, guided by ancient wisdom and powered by stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. The battle turned when Maya reached the first Catherian warform. Her plasma cutter, designed for salvage work, had been enhanced through the neural bond with principles of stellar fusion. The beam that emerged wasn't just hot enough to cut metal. It burned with the heart fire of stars, slicing through biomechanical armor as if it were paper. Thyrilax, freed from the need to protect Maya by her unexpected aerial capabilities, unleashed 50 years of pent-up fury. His claws raked temporal fissures in reality itself, sending mercenaries tumbling through brief loops of accelerated time. His wings generated gravity wells that pulled weapons from enemy hands. His breath weapon wasn't fire, as human legend suggested, but something far more terrifying. Coherent streams of void that simply erased whatever they touched from existence. The Catherians fought with desperate efficiency, but they had made a crucial miscalculation. They had assumed Thyrilax would be weakened by his captivity, slow to adapt to freedom. They hadn't accounted for human determination, enhancing draconic power, or for Maya's unique perspective, turning the dragon's ancient abilities in directions no one had imagined possible. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The last Catherian warform collapsed as Maya's starfire beam severed its primary nervous system, while Thyrilax's final roar sent the surviving mercenaries fleeing in panic. Their weapons and armor transformed into crystalline sculptures by sonic manipulation of molecular bonds. In the sudden silence, Maya felt the fusion beginning to stabilize. What had started as a desperate survival measure was becoming something permanent, a new kind of existence that was neither fully human nor draconic, but something unique in the galaxy's history. Through their bond, she felt Thyrilax's amazement and growing respect. Together, they had accomplished something that should have been impossible. A paralyzed human and a chained dragon had become something greater than the sum of their parts, a fusion of determination and ancient power that had turned a hopeless situation into victory. But Maya knew this was just the beginning. The facility's communications array had been broadcasting their location throughout the battle. More Cytherian forces would come, along with human authorities who would want to study and control what they represented. They had won this fight, but the war for their freedom had just begun. 6 months after the liberation of Paralyzed, the Starkeeper, Maya Chen, stood before the Galactic Council in a chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Her wheelchair, now seamlessly integrated with draconic technology, hummed with power that made the very air around her shimmer. Beside her, Theralax's massive form filled nearly half the assembly space, his presence transforming the political gathering into something approaching a religious experience. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary, even by the standards of their unusual partnership. Word of their escape from the Cytherian facility had spread across human space within days, carried by salvager networks and underground resistance cells. Maya had become a legend overnight, the paralyzed explorer who had freed the last dragon and merged human determination with cosmic power. But legends, they quickly discovered, came with their own set of problems. The Terran Exploration Guild had tried to recall Maya for debriefing and study. The Human Defense Force wanted to weaponize their bond for military purposes. Various corporate interests had offered fortunes for exclusive access to Thyrollax's stellar navigation knowledge. All had learned the same lesson that the Cytherians discovered too late. Some forces couldn't be controlled or contained. Maya and Thyrollax had spent their first month of freedom evading pursuit across the Outer Rim territories. The neural bond between them had deepened during their travels, creating abilities that neither species had imagined possible. Maya could now perceive space-time with draconic senses while maintaining human creativity and adaptability. Thyrollax gained access to human technological interfaces and the peculiar talent for impossible solutions that seemed endemic to Maya's species. Together, they had begun uncovering the truth behind the Cytherian War and the systematic hunting of dragons across the galaxy. What the history books called a territorial expansion had actually been something far more sinister, a campaign to capture and control the ancient guardians who knew the locations of stellar phenomena that could serve as weapons of mass destruction. Thyrollax was not the last dragon, as everyone believed, but simply the last one the Cytherians had managed to capture. The revelations had changed everything. Now, Maya looked out across an assembly that included representatives from every major power in known space. Humans, Cytherians, the crystalline Vorthak Collective, the energy beings known as the Luminary. Dozens of species that normally could barely agree on trade protocols had come together for this unprecedented session. At the center of the gathering sat the Cytherian Prime Collective, the biomechanical entity that served as the supreme authority for their species. Its multiple forms shifted and flowed as it considered the evidence Maya and Thyrollax had presented over the past hour. The data was undeniable. Stellar coordinates for weapon-grade neutron stars, black holes that could be used to devastate entire systems, and worst of all, the locations of the remaining dragon enclaves. The accusations are troubling, the Prime Collective finally acknowledged, its synthesized voice carrying harmonics of multiple bioforms speaking in unison. If accurate, they suggest our expansion protocols contained elements that violated galactic accords on the treatment of sentient beings. Maya felt Thyrollax's amusement through their bond at the clinical language used to describe 50 years of torture and imprisonment. But she had learned to channel draconic emotion through human diplomacy. "The evidence speaks for itself," she replied calmly. "The question now is what the Council intends to do about it." The human representative, Admiral Sarah Kim from the Terran Defense Authority, leaned forward in her chair. The liberation of a single dragon, while significant, doesn't necessarily require action from this assembly. Surely this matter could be resolved through existing diplomatic channels. Maya had expected this response. Human authorities were still trying to claim jurisdiction over her and Theralax, despite their obvious inability to enforce such claims. Admiral, with respect, this stopped being a human matter the moment we uncovered the locations of the other enclaves. Theralax's knowledge reveals the coordinates of at least 40 dragon communities scattered across the galaxy. Some have been in hiding for centuries. Others... She paused, letting the implications sink in. Others are still imprisoned in facilities we haven't found yet. The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives realized the scope of what Maya was suggesting. She wasn't just asking for justice for one captured dragon. She was proposing a galaxy-wide rescue operation that would challenge the post-war order that had existed for 50 years. The Luminary representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with colors that Maya's enhanced vision could now read as emotional states. The Starkeepers were neutral guardians. It communicated through harmonic resonance. Their persecution was a violation of cosmic law that predates all current political structures. Cosmic law? The Catherian Prime Collective's forms shifted into a more aggressive configuration. Dragons were never officially recognized as a sovereign species. They had no territorial claims, no formal diplomatic status. Our actions, while perhaps morally questionable, violated no established treaties. Theralax spoke for the first time since Maya's presentation began, his voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. You speak of recognition and treaties, young collective, but dragons existed when your species was still learning to shape metal. We guided the first starships to safe harbor when you thought the void between stars was empty space. We are not a political entity because we are something older and deeper. We are the memory of the galaxy itself. Through their neural bond, Maya felt the dragon drawing on power that made the chamber's air thick with potential. But instead of the destructive force he had wielded against their attackers, Theralax was doing something far more subtle and impressive. He was sharing his memories directly with the assembled representatives, flooding their consciousness with images of the galaxy's true history. Maya watched as beings from dozens of species experienced the galaxy through draconic perception. They saw the first civilizations rising from planetary cradles, guided by dragon wisdom through the dangers of early space travel. They witnessed the birth of stellar phenomena that later became sacred sites and navigation beacons. They felt the vast loneliness of the void and the cosmic joy of finding other thinking beings among the stars. But most importantly, they saw what had been lost when the dragons disappeared. Navigation techniques forgotten, stellar phenomena that once served as safe harbors, now avoided out of ignorance, entire regions of space declared off-limits, because no one remembered the pathways the dragons had carved through dangerous cosmic terrain. When the vision ended, the chamber remained silent for long moments. The Vorthak Collective's crystalline representative was the first to speak, its normally logical tones carrying unexpected emotion. The damage assessment is extensive. Galactic civilization has been operating with significant knowledge gaps for half a century. Trade routes are unnecessarily dangerous. Deep space exploration has been limited by lack of proper stellar guidance. The economic implications alone. This is more than economics, Maya interjected, rising slightly in her wheelchair to address the full assembly. What we're talking about is the restoration of something fundamental. Dragons weren't just guides, they were partners. They chose to work with younger species because they understood that diversity creates strength. The Catherians tried to control that partnership, to turn dragons into tools. They failed, but the damage they did affects everyone here. Admiral Kim shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even if we accept your assessment, Ms. Chen, the practical challenges are enormous. You're asking the major powers to coordinate rescue operations across contested territory to potentially destabilize regions that have been peaceful for decades, all for the sake of freeing beings most people consider mythical. Maya smiled, and through their bond, Thyrilax recognized the expression as uniquely human. The look of someone about to solve an impossible problem through sheer stubborn determination. Actually, Admiral, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm informing you of what Thyrilax and I are going to do, with or without Council approval. The bond between us has shown us things neither humans nor dragons understood before. We know where the imprisoned dragons are located. We know how to break the restraint systems. And we know how to adapt draconic abilities to work with human technology in ways that make us essentially unstoppable. The threat was delivered with such calm certainty that it took a moment for the implications to register. Maya wasn't requesting permission or support. She was offering the Council a chance to be part of the solution instead of becoming obstacles to be overcome. The Cytherian Prime Collective's forms shifted rapidly through configurations that Maya's enhanced perceptions read as extreme agitation. You cannot simply ignore galactic authority. There are protocols, legal frameworks that govern this kind of action. Thyrilax's response was a low rumble that seemed to come from the chamber walls themselves. Young Collective, you imprisoned and tortured one of the galaxy's oldest guardians for 50 years. You forfeited any claim to legal or moral authority the moment you decided we were resources to be exploited rather than beings to be respected. Maya offers you a chance to be part of restoration rather than resistance. I suggest you consider carefully which path serves your species' long-term interests. Maya felt the neural bond expanding as Thyrilax drew on powers she was only beginning to understand. Through draconic senses, she could perceive the quantum communication networks that connected this chamber to government centers across the galaxy. With human technological intuition guiding draconic space-time manipulation, she realized they could broadcast their message directly to every world simultaneously. Council members, she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through every translation matrix in the chamber. You have a choice. Support the restoration of the Dragon Enclaves and help rebuild the partnership that once made galactic civilization possible, or try to maintain the current system and watch us do it anyway while you struggle to explain to your populations why you opposed freeing enslaved guardians. The vote, when it came, was closer than Maya had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 43 species voted to support the restoration operations. 12 voted against. The Cytherians abstained, which Thyrilax interpreted as a form of surrender. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out to make arrangements for the most ambitious rescue operation in galactic history, Maya felt a deep satisfaction flowing through her bond with Thyrilax. They had done more than win a political victory. They had restored hope for a different kind of future. The real work begins now, she murmured to her draconic partner as they watched the chamber empty. Thyrilax's golden eyes gleamed with anticipation. Yes, young Star Watcher, now we discover what human determination and draconic wisdom can accomplish when they work in true partnership. The galaxy will not be the same. Maya smiled as her wheelchair rose on anti-gravity fields that hummed with star song. Being paralyzed had taught her that limitation was just another problem to solve. Now, with the power of dragons flowing through their bond and 43 civilizations backing their mission, she was ready to solve problems on a cosmic scale. The rescue of the imprisoned dragons would be just the beginning. Maya and Thyrilax had become something new, a fusion of human adaptability and draconic wisdom that represented the best of both species. Together, they would restore the ancient partnerships that had once made the galaxy a place of wonder and possibility. The age of Star Keepers was beginning again, and this time it would be built on true cooperation rather than domination. For a paralyzed human who had learned to fly and an ancient dragon who had remembered what freedom meant, anything was possible.